Good evening and welcome to the late April meeting of the Development Review Board. We have one item on the agenda, and it is located at 1949 East Main Street. It's application CU 2025-01, and the applicant is Vermont Youth Conservation Corps, seeking to apply for a conditional use review to expand their campus. They are applying for addition of dorm units, cabins, outdoor kitchen, and other facilities. And it's a conditional use review. Anybody who's in the audience, whether you're remote or in person, please A, sign in if you're here, B, follow Tyler's instructions if you're remote. And if you wish to be classified as an interested party, you will need to give evidence or testimony of some sort, whether it's in written or oral. That'll classify you as a possible interested party, which would allow you to appeal any decision that this board may or may not make. Next, is there anybody on the board who has a conflict or sees a potential conflict with this application? No.
No.
Okay. Who's going to speak for Conservation Corps?
Start.
Okay, let me swear you in.
Yep.
And then state your names for the record. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but truth?
I do.
Great. What you got in store for us?
Okay, I'm Breck Knopf, one of the executive directors at VYCC. I'll provide a quick overview and Brian will provide the details. So I'll start with appreciation and excitement to share our plan. Tyler, thanks for guiding us through the process to date. This is not the first time we've been in conversation with you all, so your suggestions and questions, concerns, what have you before have also been helpful. VYCC's been in Richmond for 25 years, which is kind of amazing. We really feel like we have a great home here. Our 400-acre campus is a place where we train our crews. Those crews often are spread out throughout Vermont from March through October. Our campus is also home to a lot of programming that happens. We have the farm at VYCC. That's probably the biggest thing that happens on our campus. The farm at VYCC is now the largest prescription vegetable program in the state, providing food shares to nearly 500 Vermont families. VYCC, as I think people know, is really a powerful individual learning experience. It's also a great group experience. It's also, we're also an organization that completes a lot of projects throughout the state, and at the center of both that individual work and group learning and project accomplishment is, at the center of that is learning and service. So we see ourselves as a service-based organization and also very much an education institution. The reality is we've really hit our capacity to provide value to members, to provide technical training that the partners want our crews to have. And so we're looking to make investments that will allow our programs to offer more value, to be more accessible, and to meet the needs of projects today, partners today. So some key elements that you see on the screen here, at the centerpiece of this is the restoration of the East Monitor Barn. When that's complete, this 125-year-old building will be a new four-season wash packs facility, as well as have a commercial kitchen. That'll be on the ground level. On the second level will be a four-season teaching space. Northwest of the East Monitor Barn is a new hillside dorm for approximately 16 participants. The farmhouse, which is along Route 2, not a whole lot happening on the inside there. You have probably seen that we've taken the siding off of that and we're starting to put in new windows and insulation on the outside. That feels great. And then up to the northeast of the East Monitor Barn, you'll see a collection of hillside cabins. Those are 3-season cabins that would each sleep 8. And then there's that gem of a barn, the horse barn. We used to call it the carriage barn, but Elliot Lothrop tells us that there were never carriages in there, just horses. So horse barn it is. And then finally, between the Quonset hut and the horse barn is where we want to build a new outdoor kitchen that the folks in the cabins would use. That'd be a 3-season structure. So that I think is the overview. Look forward to your questions, getting into the details. Would you add anything to that overview?
The only thing I would add is, so we're in front of you for sketch. Originally, we were deemed a plan unit development, meaning we'd be in front of you, 3-step sketch preliminary final. The town attorney weighed in since then and allowed us to submit a conditional use. So typically, this would be the first time you're seeing this site plan conditional use application for an educational facility in the commercial district. But we did have the benefit of being in front of you with that sketch plan. So you folks have seen this. It is very similar to what was proposed then, just with more detail now. Probably the largest change from that sketch plan, 2 things from the sketch plan till now, is where you see the Quonset hut building and the parking lot to the south. That's an existing parking area, gravel, dirt. That was where we showed a tech building before. Unfortunately, that had to get removed from the project, but it is part of our master plan, master development plan, so it is shown on that plan. But that is the biggest change between sketch and now. And then we had talked at sketch about the parcel in its entirety and the western monitor barn originally being part of that sketch plan application. That aspect has been removed as it's on its own piece. So we're just talking about the east monitor barn.
So if you put the tech building someday in the future in that parking lot, where will you then put parking?
If that happened, I believe the Quonset building would likely be removed. Things would be shifted uphill some, but unfortunately, it's was just had to get cut for budgetary purposes.
Yeah, we might also tuck it in a little east
Yeah.
of that parking lot too.
Understood, building costs are right up there.
Yeah.
Will the cabins, the 3-season cabins, are they gonna have any facilities, utilities to them?
No.
Not even electricity?
I think they would have solar power with batteries. So with battery storage, so people could charge tablets and iPhones and maybe have some LED lights. But I don't see them as being wired to the rest of the campus.
And what will the heat be? What will the heat be in the dorm?
Sorry, what was that?
How will you heat the dorm?
Now we're getting into questions for now. I mean, I can answer, but you're more fluent in this language.
Yeah, I would imagine heat from the dorm. Well, I know we're exploring geothermal at this time.
We are, yeah, geothermal is the answer. Was your question about the dorm, David?
Yeah.
Yeah, the dorm specifically. So the cabins are seasonal, so those won't.
Right. And what, okay,
Our goal is to have the whole campus be a net zero campus.
so I was wondering if that's where you're going. Cause you have solar array right now, don't you?
We do, I think we would,
Asher, if you're not talking, would you mind being muted?
Certainly.
we have solar on the field
That's what I thought.
of what's called the market garden, which is between the 2 barns. I think we would look for additional photovoltaic capacity, either on not on the historic structures, but on some of the new structures.
And you've applied for your septic?
We've not. So we've done the test pits. The state of Vermont was out for the test pits. We have an archaeological study planned for that area as well. No, we're going to be through Act 250. So we're fairly certain we have capacity. It's less than the 6,000 gallon or 6,500 gallon threshold for a indirect discharge. So we're well on our way, but we haven't formally applied.
And what will supply your water, your existing system?
So there's an existing TNC transient non-community well. Basically, there's limitations on how many permanent employees or people who would live on campus for certain extended periods of time. So the TNC well is going to get utilized where more people are coming and going. An existing permitted well with pretty high yield and source capacity for it. But we will be drilling a few private wells where some of the more, let's say, permanent residences or more permanent dorms are being located. So you'll see a well just uphill of the hillside dorm, as that's not seasonal, and folks being there would be there more long-term. And the farmhouse as well would fall in that category.
The system you're using now in the water, was that what they farm used when that was a dairy farm?
Yeah, I think we have 2 wells on our campus, one
Yeah.
for East, one for Westgate.
Right, and they're both permitted TNC wells, so that's a public community or non-public, not community, but higher. Expect private well.
Why don't we go through the staff notes?
Yeah. Would you like to ask what ones you're interested in or whether you have comments on?
Well, I think the comments, and I read through this and it seems like Tyler fleshed out the comments.
Yeah.
And they're in boldface, so why don't we go through it? And
Which one do you want to start with, Dave?
well, height isn't an issue, so let's start with number 12, traffic.
Yeah, so that section that's noted there, it's in section 3.6.5D, notes that no use shall generate more than 70 vehicle trip ends during the PM peak hour. There wasn't any information provided as to what the anticipated trip ends are for this. So we don't have a way of evaluating what it is one way or the other.
So we're going on the claim that you're gonna have less than 70 trip heads.
Will be less than 70. So I did research the ITE tables, obviously seeing the staff report ahead of time. So the East Monitor barn doesn't fit into a nice ITE category, programming.
Of course not.
This kitchen, right? We're talking traffic, so your off-end Saturday get together doesn't produce any peak PM trips, right? So the uses kind of fluctuate. So I kind of modeled it more off of the western barn, being that, it could be conceived as a small office building, partially at least. So, and that's generally a pretty high yield. So IT category 712 for a small office building is about 1 trip per employee. We're permitting the building for a maximum of 24 employees. I don't believe we'll get that high, but nonetheless, so that would be 26 or 24 trips. Some of the multifamily housing, being that the farmhouse is being converted or would remain as a fourplex, would contribute about 3 trips. And category I hadn't used before, but off-campus student apartment, low rise, over half a mile from campus, being that a lot of the activities VYCC participates in aren't necessarily on campus. That's got a fairly low PM peak generator. So for the 36 storm spaces, that should generate about 12 trips. So
that totals.
What about the cabins? So the
yeah,
cabins
so
counted as
I
dorms?
included that in
Dorm.
off campus. Yeah. So we're
So I noticed during the summer anyways, when you're busy, the parking lot in front of the west barn is usually pretty full. Are those cars pretty static during the week?
Yeah, because a lot of our crews are out.
That's what I figured.
Yeah, they come back on Friday afternoons. This will allow people to stay on campus, although some people will leave for the weekends.
Right.
and so it's a little tricky in the sense it's not your typical 9 to 5, typical commuting hour type use.
I think also part of the reason that parking lot has gotten fuller is because of the construction over on the east campus taking up parking spots, so we've pushed them onto the lawn.
Oh, I see. Okay. So you'll have more room once these.
Once it's all done. Yeah.
Which will never happen.
Well, we're getting there.
Okay, so we could discuss that at the deliberative session. Noise,
Yeah, so
I mean,
I pulled the DB table. We understand we'll have to be underneath that. We're further from the nearest residences that would be closer to the western monitor barn. Obviously, we're east now, given that there actually was a decent abutters list. Parcel's just 400 acres and there's quite a few residential lots way up the hill.
yeah, I see that.
Generally, there's not much for neighbors.
I mean, what do you have for noise?
Nothing, but you know.
Sometimes we rent the barn, sometimes we rent the west barn
For social
for
events?
social
Yeah.
events. Those have to wrap up by 10.
But we understand that there's the standard and we'll abide by it.
So there's one other one, 25 notes that, well, basically it's starting in 24, section 4.10.3D notes that all electrical services shall be located underground.
Can you just go over with it?
That is right here. And then it notes there, but the site plan doesn't show underground electrical utilities. It does show force mains and some other utilities. But if you look at like where the lighting is, there's no lighting for that. There's no other electrical utilities indicated on the plan. So we would need to figure out if there are any, like if there are ones that are being proposed, they need to be located underground. And if so, they need to be shown on the site plan.
And we'd be fine with a boilerplate condition that all new utility lines shall be installed underground. Generally, GMP layouts are towards the end of the assembly line and these sorts of things. I don't put the electrical design together. Human Power does. Generally, they're one of the last things we include in our plans. They're underground. They're not really anything that the town, I wouldn't think would be too interested in how they're oriented. And so, no problem including the electrical layout. It's a cool condition.
So that kind of leads us more to the biggest concern that I had. Now they do have a lighting plan. So they have satisfied the requirement into the fact that they've provided lighting and they've showed the bulbs and stuff like that. There's some other issues that we get into a little bit later that notes that there's some minor things that are missing, such as dimmers and a few other things that are shown. It's not indicated how the lighting is to be kind of controlled. The bigger issue that I had was looking at the campus as a whole and that there is no other lighting that's shown on the plan really, other than these bollard lights that are here and a light that's up by the hillside dorm. So all of these cabins and yurts, which are going to be habitated, for at least 3 seasons, there's going to be no lighting there. There's no.
Went to Boy Scout camp.
No, but the question is, is that, from a safety standpoint and some other things, people are going to be living there, walking around. And, if you have them walking around in the dark, there's some potential safety issues there.
Is that what they make headlamps for?
True. I mean, it's something that I indicated, if this is an education facility, like most dorms you would go to would have lighting at night.
Well, that's one
Very-
reason I asked if there was gonna be any electricity in the
Yeah.
cabins.
So two quick thoughts, 3 maybe. One, before we field any crews, before we do any farming, number 1 priority is safety, right? That's very much part of the culture. No one wants to get hurt. I think we would put some form of porch light, outdoor light on each of those cabins. And then the other thing is all of our core members have headlamps. I mean, they're all camping 4 or 5 days a week. They're pretty used to walking around in the dark, safely. So, if that's a condition, we can meet that condition. We have, and then well to the west of all of this, we've got 7 lean-tos tucked in back in the forest. Those aren't lit. People go out to those, every weekend night. So we've taken a similar approach here.
Where are the toilet facilities?
They would be in the East Monitor barn.
In the barn.
Yeah.
And would that be lit?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
In some of the lighting, the barn is limited, as you can imagine, going through Act 250 and historic preservation. What we're allowed to do on the outside of the barn is extremely limited. Right, so we can't put like an area light on the side of the barn or something like that, right? Safe to say it takes away from the historical integrity of the barn. So around the barn, you know, it gets a little gray how much jurisdiction they have, but they're pretty strict, as you can imagine, about what can happen on the outside of the barn, specifically.
Unless it's holiday lights, right? You got the whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, no,
Nice, neat.
I know, but I do think it's important to, you know, just thinking, you know, again, for people having to traverse there in the dark to use the bathroom or whatever it is, you know, that's something that could be considered. And again, obviously, you know, our lighting, if you, and I note that the lighting plan is intended to preserve dark skies as much as possible. But there are provisions in there to allow adequate lighting for safety and for people to be able to navigate the site safety. And there's ways you could do it through dimmers and switches and
You
other
could have
things.
little
You could
solar.
have solar light. I mean, there's things that you could do that, you know, that I think would,
They
you know,
last
that would
about
meet
6
that.
months.
Well,
And ultimately, it's your guys' call whether or not you find that to be an issue, but that was something that just jumped out at me.
When we talked about doing, you know, going to Costco and rounding up a few batches of those sorts of things. You know, if they end up on a site plan, it becomes, you know, zoning administrator territory, and I don't know if they want to be chasing that sort of.
And
thing.
he'll count them.
So you know, we intend on doing those sorts of things, you know, but
Although I would say that that is supposed to be shown on the lighting plan. That's why you have a lighting plan with the site
Right.
plan. Again, this like is to account for that. So if you're gonna show that, and again, I agree. I think you guys would put lighting there that would be dim and all that stuff, but me thinking it and having it act, you know, assuming it and then having it actually be the case are two different things. So.
Well, my question would be, just to play devil's advocate. If these are cabins that are, you know, they don't have utilities to them, are they like, where's the line between what's a lean-to and a cabin and a?
Cabins have 4 walls.
Well, right.
I'm-
But I'm saying from a requirement.
Screen to.
What, from a requirement standpoint, like, this isn't like a conditioned space. I don't know, I guess I'm just wondering where, right, like, if we wouldn't require them at a lean-to, or just because this has 4 walls, does that change really what's happening with it? I don't know. It's sort of being used in the same way. I don't know. I'm just,
Yeah, it's just
Thinking out
again,
loud, I guess,
I
but-
personally struggled, like, and this is what kind of led to the whole reaching out to the state's attorney thing, is how to classify the cabins and stuff like that. Cause I was seeing them as more as dwelling units, which I think is in our regs, but that more or less that got worked out, but it nevertheless kind of leaves us in this weird spot where like, this is, you know, a lot of people in theory that are gonna be sleeping here multiple nights through multiple months of the year. So the question is, do you want, and I'm not saying again I'm not saying you need to have every square inch of this thing illuminated with lights, but having some provisions to be able to walk down like a path to get to the barn that could be lit, I don't think is, so people could safely traverse the site, I don't think is an unreasonable requirement. Again, that's your decision to make, not
I
mine.
don't know, I went to a summer
I don't
camp
agree
and the
with that.
bathrooms were not in the cabins, and I was just thinking, I don't recall any lights. And that was before we all had headlamps.
Yeah, I think given the facility and given who's using it and that they spend a lot of time in the dark and much more dangerous settings, and I don't think anyone's coming here and expecting it to be, I wouldn't think, you know, lit up like a hotel. I don't think we need to go there. What's that?
What kind of hazards should they expect out there? I mean, there's not gonna be any traffic.
Just trip and fall, right? Like just
Well,
anywhere.
Well, there's that, and I don't mean to
You're
be,
gonna have a gravel path though, right?
yeah, there's an existing gravel path.
There can be a light on the outdoor kitchen. Kind of get you back to the flatland.
Well, I do also think, not to be, overly pessimistic about it, but if once people know that there's a bunch of people staying there, less to say you have some unsavory type that sits down there and is sitting in the dark in the night, doing whatever unsavory people want to do at night in the dark. Think having some form of lighting for people to see what's going on at night, especially given that this is an education facility use, I think isn't an unreasonable request.
Well, we-
And again, I don't think
we
it should
can
be
talk about
that.
lit all over.
Yeah.
I'm not talking,
Yeah,
Let's move on.
Okay, next is parking. Are you referring in your staff note? Number.
27
Where
or
was I?
28.
27 regarding parking specifically, or lighting specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a similar thing, is that there isn't any.
I was looking
lighting.
down at actually 34. Were you, Tyler, talking about the one that's along the road there?
I'm sorry, you talking about 32?
Yeah.
34.
We skipped 32 then.
Oh, okay, 32.
30.
Yeah, so that gets to like pedestrian pass. They do show some pedestrian pass, and again, it kind of gets to my point. There's some little trails down here, like, I don't know if you feel that's adequate enough to get everybody around. Or, and there's no crosswalks in the parking area.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, it was a gravel parking lot that has been run for some time, obviously, so it's a dirt finish by now. Existing, we're not planning on altering it other than the northern end. We're planning on squaring it off so we can meet, two-way drive widths that you'd expect in a parking lot. The striping is shown, but again, it's dirt. So, we're really just trying to allocate for how many spaces could be there. But you see that in between the two designated ADA spaces, we have a walkway going to the east monitor barn. So we didn't feel that, given that it's an existing parking lot, that it really warranted specific striping or new sidewalks or paths any more than what's there now. And then the little parking lot to the west, next to the farmhouse, those are existing as well. So everything that's left white is existing, only the new stuff above it hatched is what's changing. And so those spots are used for the farmhouse and the farm fields that are just to the west there.
But these are all gravel. This is gravel parking.
Yeah, I mean,
So they're not designated spaces. They're just,
No, but it
Correct.
helped us figure out how many spots. we
no,
had.
it's accounting for us. But
okay, I get it. But do people actually park that way or do they kind of park everywhere?
No, we got a system.
Okay,
So this will take you to our 34.
Right.
So 34 notes, going up to 33, section 5.53 AV notes the parking must be located to the side and well screened from view. So the area that's parking here, this is screened by this area of trees. This area here is visible from Route 2.
which area?
So these spots right here.
But they're existing.
True, but you are changing the site, so you can require them to move that. So, and again, that they aren't technically in compliance with the standard that's notes there, so you can either screen them with trees or you can move them.
it is to the side of the farmhouse, which is served, so it's behind or to the side, so it mostly served farmhouse is to the
But
side.
it does say the well screened from view, and there isn't any
Yeah.
trees shown on the landscaping plan there in front of them.
Is the one existing.
One tree.
The reservation that I would have about moving them to the north of the farmhouse is that's now a really great gathering area. So what you'll often see at 8 o'clock, 7:45 on a weekday morning is crews will gather, will circle up, get a plan for the day, do some stretching, figure out which crew is gonna go where, they're gonna go up to the field, they're gonna go to the market garden, they're gonna go, stay on the east campus, and having that grassy area that's between the farmhouse and the farm barn is really useful. And if you move the parking north of the farmhouse, it turns what's a useful programmatic area into a parking lot.
What's the speed limit of Route 2 there? Is it 50?
50. It's pretty much full speed, yeah.
Okay,
And I kind of noted that you could require landscaping to screen those from view. You could move them and they don't have to necessarily go to the north. They could go in another location over here where the rest of the parking is. Again, you could you could have them put the parking wherever you want them to put the parking. Or keep it there and require it to be screened. That's all your call.
Okay, we could talk about that. And the next issue which you brought up, which is landscaping. I mean, we can talk about that at deliberative session also. Unless the board has questions on that.
no questions.
Yeah.
Can I just clarify one thing with that?
Sure.
Landscaping, so it's stating here that our plantings meet the $70,000 budget, that is 1% of our construction budget. The trees themselves do not, so we're showing about 10 trees, say they're 2,000 to 3,000 after you get them planted, warranty, you know, what have you. So they do put a dent in that budget, but they don't cover the whole thing. So what we're requesting the DRB to consider is the amount of money that's being spent on restoration of the barn, that in our opinion, is gonna add way more to the visual appealing nature of that site as you drive by than 20 more trees. We are conserving the hedgerow or the treat area in between Route 2 and the existing parking lot. We would just like consideration for the restoration of the barn for the balance of that budget, which is why we don't have a explicit line by line item in our landscaping schedule like you might typically see. Obviously, the cost of restoring the barn is significantly more than the 1%.
Anyone want to guess?
It's got 7
Way
zeros.
more than the west was. This point,
Yeah, it's about $4 million.
what was the west?
That was before my time. I think that was soup to nuts, million.
So remember two.
Yeah.
So I would just point out again that the minimum landscaping costs in there, and if you read this section, it does pretty clearly talk about landscaping. You can give some credit for existing trees, existing site features, or alternative improvements. But again, if you read, I think the spirit of that is definitely talking to landscaping features. So like architecture, like architectural features of like the landscape, not re-siding the barn. So if you're going to count that, I mean, at least that's how I interpreted it. And I think that was the issue that I had, is that yes, that number meets the number that you need to meet, like per that standard, but they don't break out what that number goes to. So again, if it's only the 75, if it's only, 10,000 of that 75 is in trees and the rest is in paint on the monitor barn, I think it is getting around what the spirit of that
What is
is.
it, 10 trees,
There's 10 trees.
but several $1,000s each.
Yeah, by the time they're planted, warranty.
How big are these trees? They're 6 feet?
I could pull up the landscaping plan here.
Well, Tyler, can you bring up that clause again? I actually would disagree with that. It's entirely focused on trees. As I read that, they grant some credit for existing trees, existing site features or for alternate improvements other than tree planting, as long as the objectives of the section are met.
Right.
So I see that as saying, taking a barn that's falling down, that is iconic, that Vermont cared about, and saving it.
Right.
Should give us.
But if you read it, the purpose of the landscaping is to screen the development. So by restoring the development, you're not screening it, you're making it more visible.
It's landscaping and screening.
Yeah, we would argue that we wouldn't want to screen that barn after it's finished.
And you won't be able to screen the whole thing. I mean, the thing is what, how is it, 60
Certainly.
feet?
Yeah, I mean.
100 feet tall?
Shippo would say.
Yes. But the point is that, and again, I'm less concerned about that, but I read it as the spirit of this is the intent is to actually provide plantings or landscaping features of some sort. And I take a pretty liberal view as to what I would count as landscaping. I would count the maintenance of it, like the hours spent of the people putting the landscaping in as counting towards that cost personally. But we need to see, it has to be, I view it as being directly tied to landscaping or something like that, not repainting the side of the barn.
Okay.
That's my interpretation of it. Obviously, that's,
You can talk about that. Normally we let the applicant completely finish, but because we're going through so much here, Jared did, so I'll take a little, I'll take a little public.
Couple of quick
Thoughts
comments. I
now.
actually have a meeting that I'm supposed to have been in at 7, but we've postponed it a little bit so that we could do this. I drive past the Monitor Barn almost 4 times every day of the year. I ride my bike past it almost twice a day, every day of the year. I paid a considerable amount of money to help VYCC, help secure the land on which VYCC now sits. I would be very disappointed if I couldn't see that barn. Very disappointed. I want to see that barn. It's gorgeous. It's,
And I don't disagree. I mean, coming down the interstate, it's great to look over there and see the two
I would
bars.
also like to say one thing about speed and one thing about the parking that's in front of the current farmhouse. The parking that's in front of the current farmhouse is virtually invisible passing by. It's because of the lay of the land and the speed of traffic. By the time one could notice it, one is past that spot. Also, speed slows down enough so that as a user of the farm shares, getting in and out of that space is really not a challenge. And the farm stand that is there 6 or 8 months of the year, or whatever it is, seems like we've been surprised at how long the season has been terrific. That also provides some screening for the parking.
Mm.
So there is some landscaping, if you will, that comes out every year to serve the public.
Okay, good to see you.
Nice to see you also.
Anything else, Jared?
That's all.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Okay, let's see what's next here.
The next one that takes us into the height standard, which again, that's fine because it's pre-existing.
Loading.
Yep, so this takes us into, let me see, we start to get, no, we still got, we did the parking. We did that. Let's move in.
51.
Yeah, well, it takes us to, well, actually 48 is that there isn't really you could require a more detailed phasing plan of the project if you wanted, because they just said it was gonna start in September. There wasn't really any phases for it broken out.
The longer you wait, the more expensive it's gonna get.
Oh, we know.
So this takes us into the more substantive stuff with parking. So section 6.1.1B notes that loading spaces need to be 15 feet wide, 25 feet long.
What's
They-
loading space?
A loading is for like a tractor trailer or like any commercial thing like this has to have a loading space unless you request a waiver from the requirement and in writing. And we haven't gotten any written waivers for any of the parking requirements.
Do you have any occasion where trucks unload besides your produce?
No. I mean like a semi?
Yeah.
Yeah, you need one loading space for the first 5,000 square feet of gross floor area. And then an additional space for every 30,000 feet of gross floor area.
That's
after that.
waivable.
Yes, it is, but they do have to request it in writing, which they haven't done.
Yeah, okay. I mean, does that exist over on the West Campus as West Campus is currently configured?
I mean, that's not before us today, so I didn't
No, I
look at
know,
it,
but-
so.
I think that capacity.
Can't remember us
exists on
ever
campus.
discussing that.
Yeah,
Why don't you, I would invite you to submit a written waiver.
okay.
Yeah, there's a few of them on. So any of the parking waivers, if you want a waiver for them, they need to be requested in writing. It's noted in
Can we
that
ask
section.
for those verbally now, David, but submit them as a part of
Yeah,
approval
but,
condition?
yeah, but
Yeah.
submit them.
Okay.
In writing.
Good.
Same with the hard surfaces.
So yeah, so that's like all of them. There's other ones. There's like the hard surfacing requirement. You're technically supposed to have all the parking is supposed to be paved. Unless you explicitly request a waiver from that. So you might want to just clarify, I guess, if you want to go through which one, are you requesting a waiver to all waivable parking requirements or?
Yes, all the parking requirements that are explicitly expressed in here, finishing, obviously the existing parking lots, we intend to keep the same. Anything new is gravel.
That would include your comment for 53 then.
Yeah, there's one about the, also there's a bike rack requirement that's noted in there too. That
You don't have any bike racks?
has to be located at the front of the barn.
Oh, okay. We'll be more than happy to show up. Okay.
Cause you can request a waiver from that. If you don't wanna request. a
I think
waiver
that'd
from it,
be-
You can have it.
You must have someone that rides their bike.
Yeah. We'll show up. It's no big deal.
Jared would want a bike rack.
I don't want a bike rack.
Yeah, no big deal.
You gave us a number of employees. Was it, what did you tell us?
Well, the most we're gonna permit for the East Monitor Barn would be 24.
So you would need just 24, guaranteed
permanent.
24 per.
Don't expect that to be used, but design septic system.
And to be clear, obviously this lot is not for the entirety of the VYCC because you still have the West Monitor Barn lot as well.
That's correct.
So it's really just how many new employees this would be.
That's correct.
The last kind of like really big one here would be section 6.1.6.6 which notes the drainage requirements for the parking areas. And they do have a gravel wetland on the site plan, but it's not indicated what the standard was built to, which notes for in Richmond, it has to be for a 25-year, 24-hour storm event.
Yep, so we will be applying for a state stormwater discharge permit. We're an existing developed site with over an acre of impervious, so the threshold for expansions and redevelopment even is pretty small.
Isn't it a half acre now?
It is for new, undeveloped, a developed piece with
Oh,
Quarter,
you can
isn't it?
develop up to an acre of impervious on a
oh, I didn't
developed
realize
piece.
there was that
Given the
distinction.
amount of impervious here already, we're at an acre already. When you're at an acre, redevelopment or additions at that point, the threshold's pretty small. I think it's like 5,000. We're redeveloping, we're adding, so we'll likely have to incorporate some site balancing to capture what's necessary where the gravel wetlands being shown. But we are required to get a state stormwater permit as part of the 1950 process. We'll be certain to design that to a 25-year standard. The state will require us to design to a 10-year standard. So as part of an approval condition, I have no problem submitting a letter or, you know.
So we're stricter than the state?
Yes.
Mhm.
Different. It's just beat and blow.
Once you get 10 acres, the state's 100-year. So Richmond doesn't contemplate that scenario, but less than 10 acres, yeah, you're a little bit more.
That's pretty uniform, like if you look at the subdivision regs and the public works specs, it always references 25-year, 24-hour. So whenever they drafted this, I'm sure that was what it was, and they haven't updated it or really changed it since.
But the state will have additional standards, water quality, channel protection, you know, like I said, the 10 years as far as they go. Really, the higher standard is only retention. not water quality.
There's a potential difference between the town regs and the state regs, right? So the state regs for stormwater will apply to new impervious,
New redeveloped.
redeveloped.
Right.
But it's unclear to me on town regs whether it applies to existing or just new. You know, the parking area shall be designed, blah, 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 blah. No increase in peak on the 25-year storm. So like what portion of the site is jurisdictional for that? For the drainage standard?
Yeah, I've always interpreted it to be the whole thing.
Yeah,
So-
that's a lot.
And I'm not disputing that, but like I
Yeah,
said, that's
yeah.
just that's how I've always read that particular section because it's written that broad, and my job to much to my pain and sorrow from time to time is to read these literally. So if it doesn't give me a cutoff, I say, well, it says if you're parking there, I count where you're parking.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't necessarily count like the barn or the other things itself, but it specifically calls out
It says
the parking area.
Right, but the whole purpose of that section is for all land development. And if like, you're not developing the parking, it's existing. Is it land development for these purposes?
And again, I think the reason,
You know. New building, absolutely, new development, new paths, but
what would trigger it for me, I think, is because they're changing, they're expanding that use. So anything like if the site as it sits today, if you were to ask me, does it need to meet this standard right now, if it hasn't already met it, I would say if you weren't making these changes, I'd say no, because it's there, it exists. You're not proposing any changes. It can exist in its present condition in perpetuity if it wasn't required to do that. But because we're changing it, any of that grandfathering kind of goes out the window. So you do get the opportunity to look at it again, whether you choose to, to do that, that's your guys' call, but we do have the opportunity to, we're not bound by the fact that we did it in the past. We can change it or keep it the same. It's, obviously they have to comply with any state regulations that they have to comply with, but that's kind of your guys' call whether or not it needs to be built to that. It is pretty explicit what standard it needs to be built to.
It is, Patrick well knows, the difference between just new and everything is a big difference. That's a big difference.
Big expensive difference,
Very, very
What's
different.
that, David?
big expensive difference.
Yeah, I mean, we are also seeing, increase of stormwater events too as well. So things that weren't maybe as big of an issue in the past. I mean, just down the road from where VYCC was, Lily Pond Circle and all that got absolutely pounded.
Yeah, my
You know-
question is what's a 25-year storm?
Well, it's a good point, but it's, that whole area has been,
Right.
it's been trashed. I mean, Pete was lost $1 million box culvert that was built to what the standard was, and that wound up halfway, in the Huntington River for the most part, pieces of it anyways. But kind of going on from that, there's some smaller one, which is an internal traffic control sign. Is like, do you want to direct the traffic where to go, especially since they have that little split entrance? You can require there to be signs to direct that traffic in and out one way. Also that there isn't any fire lanes shown on the site plan, and they are required to have fire lanes. There wasn't a letter from the fire department either, which is also
What do they say?
a requirement. Jerry's looked at the site plan, but he hasn't, nobody requested a letter. So they haven't written a letter yet, but he has seen the site.
Did you have any concerns?
I can't recall. We had a conversation about it, but I don't have anything in writing. I went back to look to see if I had an email from
What
him
does a fire lane mean?
to be able to get to be able to park a fire truck in there. Like you can't park there. So that way the fire truck can come access the site.
If the fire chief wants signage, not a huge deal. It does have access to 3 sides. It's pretty good access considering where it is.
And then let me see here, the last one. There was some stuff on silt fencing. There is erosion control plan. So all these,
That'll be part of their general permit though, won't it? Isn't silt fencing?
Yeah.
Part of the general permit?
Yes.
well, this gets at up here, these cabins are built on a slope. At least appear to be a slope of 20% or more. So there is some silt fencing down below, but there is supposed to be, and there is an erosion control plan with it. The question is whether or not you want to require anything additional because those are on slopes 20% or more.
But what I'm saying is, if they have to go get a general permit, they're gonna have to show all that silt fencing on the general permit.
That's correct.
There is some shown here too. And over at these
Anticipate to be
locations.
over an acre disturbance, so we'll be more than happy to submit a construction general permit as part of our zoning permit application. And just so it said, the cabins are proposed on piles right now, so the amount of disturbance will be less than a traditional foundation.
Mhm.
On piles,
Pilings,
Pilot.
islands.
sonotubes.
Zip, 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 zip.
Screw piles.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, those are great.
Don't anticipate a ton of impact, but like you said, will be covered under the construction general permit.
Get them all done in a couple days, all ready to go. Things are,
Stop
they
sharing.
they go in quick.
You don't know.
Any,
That's what you hit though, right?
any questions from the board?
There is one member too from
I
the
know,
public.
I'll
too,
get
if you
there.
know.
No others.
No,
Roger?
No, I'm good.
No? Okay, remotely, do you have questions? Why don't you unmute yourself and ask your questions?
Going once. Going twice.
Asher, do you have a question?
No, I was here to support Brack and Brian on the VYCC side. So I-
Gina. Gina Haddock is the only other
Right.
one.
Oh, no, I don't have any questions. I think VYCC is a fabulous neighbor. I was just interested in what was going on, but I support all what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina.
He's your closest neighbor, right?
Yeah, nobody's come down for coffee yet, but they can, if they want to.
Okay, anything else for the applicant?
No.
So I think I'd entertain a motion to go into deliberative session.
So move.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. We have 45 days to make a decision. We'll certainly try to be
More prompt.
quicker than that.
Thank you.